which is not, it's not a Chevron flash drive, but it's from a company called Technique that does a lot of work for Chevron. So this is an 8 GB flash drive, and when you plug it into your computer, it lights up, it turns blue. It's pretty cool. And I thought I'd bring it because I have a lot of flash drives, and I thought you guys might be able to use it for school. So I'll be giving these things away towards the end. And you guys, this is really informal, so we have time for the end for question and answers, but if you have questions throughout the presentation, just raise your hand and ask. Okay? Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Yep. All right. So this is just a little bit of an agenda. Again, not something we have to stick to because this is informal, but I thought I'd give you all a little bit of information about my background, where I come from, how I came to be here with you guys today. I'll talk a little bit about Chevron, just because most people only know Chevron gas stations, right? That's all that I knew before I started working in Chevron. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit more information about Chevron, which, again, it extends to a lot of the other big oil and gas companies. So Exxon, Shell, BP, we're all set up in a very similar manner. So if you know something about Chevron, you'll know something about the rest of them. Then I'll talk a little bit more about careers in the energy industry. What are some of the things you could do? It's not just engineering. So I'll go ahead and tell you guys what are some other things you could do in the energy industry if engineering is not something that really interests you. But then, of course, I'll talk more about engineering since that's what I do. So I'll give you guys a little bit of introduction to some of the things that I work on. And then we'll wrap up with question and answers. But again, ask questions throughout if you have them, okay? All right, so my background. There's certain things that we can't put on Chevron slides, because I have to get it all approved by our legal people. And that would take a long time. So I decided to just talk about my background. I wrote it up so I don't sit here and talk all morning. So I'll just read from this paper since I can't really put it on the slides. So I mostly grew up here in Southern California with my mom and my brother. I went to public school my whole life. My mom couldn't send me to private school. Later on in life, my mom, of course, met my stepdad here in the back. When I was we just started high school. But for the most part, it's just my brother and I and my mom. So I went to public elementary, middle school, high school, and then I went to UC Irvine after that. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to study at UC Irvine. I know a lot of the times people push you guys to know what you want to do by the time you get to college and have that major declared before you get there. But if you don't, that's okay. I didn't. I started off as an undecided major. My mom was saying, you gotta decide, but that's what I did for my first year. So then I switched to biology because I thought I wanted to go to medical school. But however, I figured out that it would take me about 8 years to get a bachelor's degree and then go to medical school. And to be quite honest, I didn't want to spend that much time in school. School's great and all, but I just didn't want to be there for another 8 years. And I also found out that if I completed a biology major, I couldn't expect to make much money if I decided not to go to medical school later on for some reason. So I decided to look into other options while I was at UC Irvine. So my mom really encouraged me, as I was growing up and even in school when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to study. She said, you need to study something that's going to enable you and your family to live comfortably. As opposed to just something you like to learn about. I really liked sociology. It was fun to take those classes. You take the general classes when you first start. But my mom really kind of pushed me, hey, you need to study something that's going to enable you to live comfortably. Because we didn't live comfortably. I can tell you, we didn't always have food on the table when I was growing up. So, at the time, I didn't really understand her motive for that. I didn't necessarily even agree with it. But of course now, hindsight's 2020. So I know why she encouraged me to do that. Really, any major that you study, you can turn that into a job that you really enjoy doing. So the most important thing, really, is to make sure you study something that enables you to earn a salary that allows you and your family to have the things that you want, and everything that you need, and some of the things that you might want. So if you want a nice car, for example, you need to have a salary that enables you to do that, right? So I ended up studying chemical engineering at UC Irvine. And quite honestly, I didn't know anything about engineering. Nobody came to my school like I'm doing now to talk to you guys about engineering. So I didn't know anything about it. The main driver for me is that I went to the bookstore, I opened up the catalog for UC Irvine and had kind of the average starting salaries for each major. And I thought, oh wow, these engineers seem to make a decent salary after only going to school for 4 years. So I think that's what I'll do. And the reason I chose chemical engineering as opposed to any other type of engineering is because I had already taken several chemistry courses. Well, not several. I took a year, 3 quarters of chemistry courses at UC Irvine as a biology major. So I decided I'd lose less time by going into chemical engineering. So you might be thinking really that I must be really smart. I finished an engineering degree, right? You guys thinking that? Yeah. It's not true. I won't say I'm dumb. I'm not dumb. I'm smart enough, and I'm willing to work really hard. So as I started off in chemical engineering, the upper level courses were not as intuitive as some of the chemistry courses that I took early on in college. So I really had to work hard. But I definitely wasn't that person who got a really high score on my SAT or anything like that. I went to office hours. They have office hours where you can go and meet with professors, ask them any questions that you might have about your class. I went to free tutoring. I even paid for tutoring for some really hard courses, And throughout that time, I'll say I worked when I was in school. So I didn't have the luxury, like a lot of people that I went to school with, to just study. Right? I worked in and out. I worked at Verizon. By the time I got to my upper level courses, I worked as a tutor. So it can be done. I also made sure to join study groups and work with people that I could gain a lot from, whether it was academically or just inspirationally. One of the gals I studied with was a single mom with 3 small kids. So I kept telling myself, if she can do it, I can do it. So I surrounded myself with people that not only inspired me, but also really could teach me something, right? So basically, I think in my opinion, you don't necessarily have to be super duper smart. And in fact, there are a lot of super smart people that aren't very successful, right? So you have to be smart enough, associate yourself with people that you can learn from, and just be willing to learn and persevere and work hard and turn your weaknesses into strengths. One of the things that my mom was always really worried about for me is that I just couldn't write. I was terrible. She's like, how does this kid ever get to survive in college? This can't write worth anything. But what I did in college is I took a really difficult writing course. Like a typical course is 4 credits. The one that I took was 8 credits, right? And some people were saying, no, you don't want to do that along with your other courses. It's too much, And I just did it. And now writing is one of my strengths because I challenge myself to take that class. Typically, engineers aren't very good writers anyway. We do a lot of math and science, and we don't really have to read a lot, so we don't tend to be good writers. But it's something that I was able to turn a weakness into a strength. During undergrad, I also completed a study abroad program in England, so that's the only time that I didn't work when I was in England because I couldn't work. And so I was there for 9 months. And I don't know, for some reason I always wanted to do a study abroad. So it's definitely something that I recommend if you're able to fit that into your studies when you go to college. Most universities have partnerships with other international universities. So you don't have to pay more most of the time to do those kinds of programs. You just pay whatever you're paying, the UCI or whatever school you're going to, plus your airfare to get to the country that you're going to study in. So I completed 9 months in England, but there are semester and summer programs, so you don't have to go for that long. So it's definitely something that I recommend. Learning about a new culture and seeing a different part of the world is priceless. That's all part of your education. It's not just going there to study, but learning about the other cultures too. When you start working, that helps you to better relate to people and perform well in your job. So after completing my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering at UC Irvine, I got a scholarship to go to the University of Michigan. So I did a master's degree in environmental engineering at the University of Michigan. And again, I didn't get a scholarship because I'm there's a lot of funding out there for engineering graduate students. So I put myself out there to look for those opportunities. Worked really hard, showed potential, built relationships and credibility with different people in my field. So I ended up getting offers for scholarships to go to a couple different schools. But luckily enough, I got to go to Michigan, and that's a really, really great engineering program. So after graduate school, I joined Chevron, and I've worked at Chevron for about 6.5 years. And don't be fooled by this picture, okay? Picture here, I don't work there, okay? I don't work in the middle of the ocean. I don't work at the gas stations that you guys see. I work in an office. Chevron has, I'm in Houston again for the third time now. Chevron has 6 offices in Houston. We have offices around the world. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that later. So since I've been willing to move, you don't have to move. It's a plus if you're willing to move in the energy industry. But if you don't want to move, at least companies like Chevron won't force you to move. But since I've been willing to move and perform well in all of my jobs, I've worked and traveled to various locations within the company. I've been fortunate enough to visit over 20 countries so far, including Australia, Thailand, and 6 countries in Africa. I am currently working in Houston, as I mentioned, as a project engineer, and I'll go into a little bit more details about what you can do at Chevron, the career to the industry a little bit later on. And finally, right now, I'm applying to complete a Master's in Business Administration. Have you all heard of a Master's in Business Administration or an MBA? Heard of an MBA? Okay. It's basically formal training in English. So as an engineer, or in business, as an engineer, I didn't have any business training. It was all very technical. But now I work with a lot of finance people and lawyers, and senior level managers, to help them make strategic business decisions. And as a part of that, you do your technical work, if that's what you decide to do and enjoy. So I decided, I should go back and get some formal business training to be more effective in those interactions with those people. So Chevron pays 75% of my tuition and fees, so that's another reason to go do it, right? And I plan to start at either Rice University or the University of Texas in August, so I'm waiting to hear back. I should know something this week. It's kind of anxious time, right? So I'm continuing that pattern of hard work, right? It doesn't end when you finish college. You keep, pursuing your dreams and pushing to better yourself. When I look around at the senior leadership in my industry and in other Fortune 500 companies, which is really big companies in the U.S., there are hardly any women and hardly any minorities in senior level positions, right? I mean, it's getting better at the lower levels. We're hiring a lot of diversity within the company. But when I look at the top, there aren't any women. I won't say any. There are very few women and very few minorities. So, my goal is to be a senior level executive within Chevron someday. So I still have a lot of hard work ahead of me. So hopefully that gives you all some perspective of where I come from